Nashville, Tennessee, America's newest, most thriving metropolis of around 2.5 million people, including its entire metro statistical area. This is a place filled with luxury condominiums in the Gulch, one of America's most desirable tourist centers on Broadway, as well as musicians talented around the world coming together to make America's next hit song. However, we're not going to be spending time here. Instead, we're going to be going off the beaten path of the city and investigating those that might be living much less fortunate lives than those in luxury apartments in the Gulch. We're going to go to Chestnut Hill as an example, where I currently live. And we're going to be investigating the people who tend to stray away from the well-lit streets of Nashville and instead confine themselves to the dimly lit alleyways, underneath man-made structures like bridges, and alongside the rail lines that have made this city what it is today. This is a short documentary about the forgotten in Nashville, and we're going to compare them to those around the world to see what we can do to make their lives better and truly show them how they're remembered. With that being said, I'm off work, so let's make a quick wardrobe change. Let's give the dog Bailey plenty of pets to elicit some ahs from the classroom, and let's stop in and grab a just classic White Monster energy drink. And as we begin this investigation, let's start with those that we already know how we treat them today.
You know what, man? It's a small car in spirit. That's what counts. So they aren't playing any music right now, but this speaker right here is set to be playing opera music, and sometimes they intentionally blow these speakers out before installing them with a lot of bass-heavy music, so the opera music is extra distorted and is even more unpleasant to be around.
Another such example is going to be a clip from this earlier setting with this underpass. Growing up as a kid, I have associated this as being the homeless people underpass. But the same amount of people still live there even though it's empty. They've just been forced to move off to the side. Where they go to looks a lot like this, an area that I've seen plenty of people who are without homes staying within the trailer and other man-made structures. What they try to do to get by is illustrated by the chair. They try and beg on the street for any resources they can get. Cash, nicotine, food, water, anything they can get their hands on. And this point was really unfortunately illustrated even when I was filming on this very late night time, as there was someone who was out on the street asking for begging, to which I panned the camera away from him in order to not give him any too significant time on just recognizing his face. He has a right to privacy, even though unfortunately he's been rendered out to spending his whole life in the public space.
Prolonged exposure to the street life on any American city can take a great toll on people who are without homes and have no refuge from such experiences. Contrary to popular belief, someone who is without a stable place to stay for the night, they're often exposed to these elements after they end up on the street, and their addiction to something like a cigarette or a vape or any other nicotine alcohol source tends to be a consequence of them ending up on the streets and not a cause. Let's look into what they have to do to survive day to day.
The Contributor newspaper, which is attached to First Presbyterian Church in downtown Nashville. It provides a really great way for people who are without homes to get jobs and try and make some money, but obviously that level is inconsistent. However, a really great weakness outside of one listed is the fact that it does invite a lot of people that they cannot accommodate, and so they just tend to pitch up and camp outside of Nashville. But after I've just gotten a quick sample of Nashville, I decided to head over to Europe and see what they have to offer.
Hey, welkom in Europa, jongen!
Amsterdam, the capital of the Netherlands, in order to provide a deep dive into the kinds of resources that their city provides to people who are less fortunate than the average individual. So follow along as I review the Netherlands homelessness resources.
Hi, I'm Johnny Knoxville. Welcome to Jackass.
For starters, they have a social safety net for people who are at risk, known as Huurtoeslag. This is essentially a housing stipend for if they're able to determine that you are at risk, but even if that falls through and you still end up on the streets, there's the Rainbow Group. The Rainbow Group is a very wide encompassing nonprofit group that operates within Amsterdam. They have over 30 locations providing job opportunities, temporary shelter, as well as connections to help people attain full employment and leave their current homelessness state. We received an underground tour by a man named Michelle, for such an instance, and he was very excellent. Over here was just a quick example of a type of drop-in center that we took across the street, and then that was the end of our trip in Amsterdam. It's a lot, I know, but we're going to head back to Nashville.
To get a further in-depth look at how people without a home can try and sustain their day-to-day needs like food, water, and other types of general hygiene, we're going to cross the river and go to East Nashville and see what's available there.
As well as Von Stropenaars and Hamden Turner have reached the same conclusion that city governments take the wrong approach to treating homelessness problems, and that is one of like a natural disaster that necessitates authority and immediate swift action. Or, in other words, this culminates in a housing first policy followed by the United States. This purports that if you don't have a house, well, the problem is you don't make enough money or there's not enough houses, and there's no other greater issues that are at play. Of course, there are a great many reasons why any individual could end up homeless, and let's investigate more about their day-to-day experience.
One big thing that I'm sure you've noticed as I am going along is that I'm spending a lot of time in my car. This is partly intentional, obviously, as I want to, make sure I hit all the spots as efficiently as I can, and really get the most amount of time in doing the proper research and citing for this documentary. However, another part of it I really think is a great example of how car-dependent Nashville is. So, obviously, I'm traveling. All the footage within this documentary has been taken within about a 10-mile radius. If you probably draw a circle around some point on the Cumberland River, this is not a huge distances. We're not talking about completely opposite ends of the city, but what we are talking about is distances that are exceptionally difficult to traverse through personal motorized transportation or through personal motorized transportation. We will look into transportation options for people who are homeless coming here, but I do think that the fact that a lot of these people who are on the streets, they are without motorized transportation, and they are therefore expending calories in order to move from one place to another at a much greater rate for distance than we are. And so I think that's another element that we don't necessarily consider, and it's a really key factor as to, I think, why a lot of people who are out on the streets are additionally emaciated beyond what we might just attribute to any outside circumstances, including drug use, obviously inability to actually purchase the food and the calories. But let's actually think about how someone who is on the streets is going to be acquiring sustenance for themselves on any given day. Beautiful. Thank you. Have a good one. Oh, and can I get some cookout sauce? Lots of memories of people who are without houses, in addition to people living in government-subsidized housing, live in what are called urban food deserts, meaning that their groceries and other typical fresh fruits and vegetables are not easily accessible without motorized transportation. As a result, they often default to what might be closer, which is either packaged foods from gas stations or fast food restaurants. So, what is our late-night guilty pleasure becomes the backbone of their nutrition program. Man, cookout shakes are good.
Regarding public transportation, Amsterdam has one of the most advanced public transportation systems in the world, which both the richest and the poorest use almost every day. That includes both above-ground light rail, below-ground dedicated metro systems, and both above and below-ground train systems. And let's compare this advanced system to Nashville. Nashville has next to nothing. It's honestly a laughingstock of a public transportation system. So here I am, and I'm going to drive past a bus station, and I want you to point out to me where that bus station is. Did you see it? Here, let me go back in slow motion for you. Yeah, it's that. The little sign and the ridiculously tiny bench. That's Nashville's public transportation. America's best option for people who are facing homelessness has nothing to do with government and more to do with culture. And that is a culture that is accepting and extroverted, especially when under the influence of some booze. Like, look at this guy. He's just vibing with me, and I've never seen him before. This kind of environment is very prevalent in East Nashville, and it's something that Gibbs and as well as Mother Teresa would confirm is an excellent way to help counter the relational poverty that people who are experiencing homelessness continue to face. For example, this back alleyway parking lot, I've had multiple conversations with people who I had no other assumptions of who they were outside of the fact that I just met them that night and they ended up being homeless. So with this, I hope you have something extra for you to take forward, and I thank you for watching.